So today in Room Design Talks, we have Nika Zupanc. She's a product and interior designer based in Slovenia. She became globally recognized with the launch of the Lolita lamp produced by Moe. And she has collaborated with Dior, De Castelli, More, Rossana Orlandi, as well as running your own brand. So
Yes.
I wanted to start from the beginning, and I wanted to ask you about that very first collaboration with Moe and your Lolita lamp. Tell us about that.
The story. I think it's a beautiful story because in a way I started exhibiting my products at a designer's block in London, and then in the same year also at Salone del Mobile. But at the same time, of course, I was also trying to find my way into the production of these bigger companies, and Moe was one of the companies that I really wanted to work with because I felt that we share a similar philosophy, a similar approach to the design, so that our DNA is kind of match. And it's just a beautiful story because I didn't know anybody. I just knew the company, so I didn't know Marcel Wanders or Casper Wissers, who was one of the owners at the time. And I also didn't have any contacts. So I just decided that I will, put Marcel on my mailing list when I was sending out invitations for my exhibition in Salone del Mobile. And there was a picture of my mate chair on this invitation. And Marcel, he saw that invitation, he loved that chair, and he reached out. And this is, how our collaboration started. So we didn't proceed with that chair because the production costs were really high. And then I sent and showed some other projects, and Lolita was one of these projects. And the next year it was out, and it was my first mass-produced product. And I think it was really wonderful on many levels, also because I think it's one of the showcase pieces that kind of describes also my philosophy and my approach to the design.
I see. And what about your collaboration with Rossana Orlandi? How did that started? Because it's so early on in your career.
Yeah, it's always, I always say that it was, and it still is, it's like a snowball. You start with one project, you show every year in Milan, and then things just pile up. They start to build up. And all these collaborations are really beautiful and very unique. And of course, the collaboration with Rossana Orlandi again happened naturally. I was searching for a place for my own exhibition, and I knew about the gallery, but I wasn't really familiar with Rossana Orlandi. So I went there mostly by coincidence. And when I stepped into that garden of hers, I was really like overwhelmed about the place itself. And I said, okay, this is my home. She didn't knew me. She was skeptical at first, but then when she realized that I'm the designer who did the 5 o'clock collection, so this is this collection for Moe, which she really loved, and she was like, okay, let's do something together. And my first exhibition at her gallery was titled Self-Discipline. So it was this collection of homework, pieces for homework. And it was a very successful collection in the sense of limited editions. And this is how we started. And then each year, beside all other products, I always do a limited edition piece for her gallery.
Okay, every year.
Every year since 2012, yes, except this year because it's a very unique year.
Year. So, I mean, you've got that relationship, and I mean, it's a long-term collaboration. You've been working together for 8 years now, which is...
Yeah, but I think this is kind of, it's sort of a goal, not just with galleries, also with companies. Usually it is long-term relationships because you really have to build up. You have to know the company or the gallery. And if one collaboration is very successful, usually then also other collaborations follow.
I see. And in addition to these collaborations, you have your own line of products that you design and produce. So how do you deal with your personal work versus commissioned pieces? And what do you get from each one?
You know, this personal collection, it's interesting because it wasn't really a goal, so it happened naturally.
Uh-huh.
Of course, in the beginning of my career, when I didn't have so many collaborations with other companies, I tried to show my work because I always had this big passion to tell stories through the design. So I always did some kind of a exhibition, whether in Milano or in London or in Paris. And for those exhibitions, of course, we showed products, but those products were also already industrialized. So they were ready for mass production, and they got such a, let's say, big audience, so many requests that we said, okay, we need to do like a personal collection, add an object or two each year. And
Mm-hmm.
this is how it happened. And it's kind of a classical collection. So it sells through the years with simple, small additions, but it is always there. And on the other hand, I mean, I love it. It's really neat. But on the other hand, I'm also very much intrigued when I work for other companies, maybe even more, because I'm an industrial designer by my heart. So I really like to be actually limited
Mm-hmm.
and then be creative inside of these limitations. This is the real excitement for me.
Okay, I picked one of these collaboration because I found very interesting the aesthetic, and that is your Dalmatia collection with Point, which is
Okay.
a Spanish brand. And I wanted to ask you about the process and what is the involvement of the brands besides the briefing when you work with them. How was in this case your collaboration with Point?
Uh, in this case, I was invited to add a little bit of a softness. Let's say this was in the brief. So they were, you know, and usually this is the case with the companies. When they come to our studio, they know very well what they need in
Uh-huh.
their own collections in
Mhm.
order to, let's say, to demonstrate a new way, something that they want to say inside their own company. So usually, as I said before, it's always my philosophy adapting to their philosophy.
Mhm.
And in case of Point, which is a wonderful, wonderful company from Valencia, my first Spanish collaboration. Now we are doing second with a company named Hotik,
Mhm.
also from Valencia. So it was the case to find a different, more rounded, more soft approach in the sense of outdoor furniture.
Mhm.
And with the names, it was really beautiful because I'm very much connected to Dalmatia in Croatia, where we have a house, and I spent, you know, a lot of time on the sea, with the sea. It's one of the main inspirations, and it was the most natural thing to kind of drag inspiration from this Mediterranean type of living, and this was the backstory for the collaboration.
Mhm. Interesting. And going through previous interviews you've done, reading about your work, in 2011, you said that the design industry was largely a boys' club that you wanted to challenge. What have you seen changing in this regard in the last 9 years, if you've seen any changes?
I mean, you know, I think this it's a very important topic on which I didn't want to comment at the beginning of my career because I always felt that it was somehow. Uh, uh, I wanted my work to speak for itself. So, you know, not to enter the gender politics when speaking about the design, because I think and believe the design should be and is genderless.
Mhm.
Of course, when you observe, there are less women in the production, less women in the design. Uh, so it's a little bit different. So you feel it, but I think you feel it in every profession, you
Mhm.
know. And I think this equality of women in many professions, it's still a fight. So we are not really there yet. But then again, things also are changing. I think if you are, you know, really talented as a designer, if you really can contribute to the design as a profession, it really doesn't matter the gender, the country where you come from, the sexual orientation. It has no meaning. Then of course it was kind of a boys club, it still is, but I think you can, with the really good work, it doesn't really matter. Really, with the really good work, you always find your audience.
Okay, so by what did you mean by challenge? Did you want it to? I want to understand if we're talking about the industry itself, the fact that there are less women in design as generally in every industry, or because you mentioned that design should be genderless. So that's
Yes, of course. I think the challenge was actually on two levels. One, for sure, it was to enter the industry itself, which was and still is, as I said, maybe, there are so many men running the production itself, so they didn't let so many women in. You have companies, big companies, that don't have any women designer engaged in their products, or there is just one woman. So for sure, this was a position that I was aware of, let's say. And of course, I was also very determined to enter into these companies, to do the work, because I really felt that the story that I'm telling is contributing to the design profession as such. And for that reason, I also, on the other hand, in my projects, I wanted to work with elements that were in sort of a ghetto. And Lolita is a very good example, because for Lolita, let's say, we introduced it in 2008, and we introduced it in a pink color. And to introduce something in pink color in 2008, it was a daring gesture. And there was, a title in the Moe catalog, Who's Afraid of Pink, Under the Lamp. So we were, using a color which had a sort of predominant meaning, but we were using it in a way that we try to change the meaning of this color. And if you look today, or let's say 2 or 3 years ago, where the pink color was one of the most used colors in Milan, you see that the color became genderless, that it has a new meaning. And, at that time, I was asked a lot, because they were all speaking, all the media, about the pink color. And of course, I had a lot of interviews, a lot of people asking me, because they knew that I was using this pink color, not just with Lolita, also with other projects, trying to change the meaning. So this was also part of the challenge. So speaking through the objects, using things that, were in the ghetto of meaning, and then using them in such a way that they got a new meaning, let's say genderless meaning, a new approach. So those were the challenges, let's say, I was addressing with this sentence.
Because you seem to use these feminine stereotypes in a very, very smart and efficient way in your designs. It's subtle, but it's very direct at the same time. And I wanted to ask you how, because in an interview I heard someone referring to your work as a feminine design, and you said that is not feminine design but feminist design.
Yes.
So do you believe there is a feminine design as opposed to what it is considered universal, which would be
no. No, I personally believe we shouldn't use this F word in sense of femininity in the design, because it gives a really strange connotation to the design as such. I prefer, as I said, it's not genderless. In the minute when you say femininity, you include this gender discussion, which I think it shouldn't be part of the evaluation when you do design. Of course, there are designers which offers different poetics, but I don't think they apply to gender. They apply to different type of people, to different age of people, to different poetry. So I always said I like to use words like elegance, beauty. poetry when describe things that maybe are a little bit more emotional, that evoke emotions, that are more intuitive, more instinctive, more soft. Because what I was also challenging, and maybe I'm still challenging, is the modernism itself. Because I, I mean, I still believe in this paradigm that form follows function, and also in my work, I think function, innovation, materials are the base
Mm-hmm.
of everything. But then I add emotion, I add drama, I add excitement. But in that sense, and if you look into the history, modernism was chauvinistic, and modernism was excluding women.
Uh-huh.
So with these gestures in design, with bringing these elements, I was actually challenging these gestures from the history, which uh, despite the fact that I base my work on modernist
Mm-hmm.
principles, but there were things which were chauvinistic. And through the objects, through the design, I was trying to change that with the Lolita lamp, with the ribbon chair. So this was all a little bit, let's say, gestures of small rebellion.
Yes, I looking at your work, it's the feeling that I got. It's like you're not apologizing for being a woman or a girl. Not only that,
Of course,
you're claiming all that sort of poetic universe that is related to this idea of what women like, and you're giving it a place where you completely change the meaning. That what really amazes me about your work, and not only through your pieces but the names that you pick. There's so many references to literature, not any kind of literature. We have some like names of your pieces, like I'll buy flowers myself, which is
yes.
from Mrs. Dalloway.
Delaware.
Yes, A Room of One's Own, Maid Chair, Lolita Lamb, which are not literally referenced, but those are sort of literal feminine archetypes. The maid,
Yes.
Lolita, the. So, do you use the names of your projects to position yourself that way as well?
I think the names are always, they give you a hint in which you should think when
Ah,
you see a certain object. I
mhm,
think it's always the object, and I really believe that, really good design objects, they don't need anything. They don't need marketing. They don't need
mhm.
names. They should speak by themselves. But then again, I think names are always a beautiful addition because they give just a little just a little of more story. And of course, in those pieces that you described, names were especially important because they were really sort of really strong directions I was trying to address in a way that you described, which it's really beautiful. And I'm happy that you understand my work the way you said you do.
Well, I am very passionate about your work as a well as a design lover, as a feminist as well, because I think that you are very smart and very subtle. The way you use names, as you were saying, your designs are very you can understand them, you can connect with them without an explanation. But with these kind of names, you add another layer of information. It's almost like a political statement, and not for everyone, because if you haven't read Virginia Woolf, you're probably not aware that
Of course,
these
the
names
meaning and the weight of that
exactly.
kind of a name.
And what she talks about in her literature, it's present in that. And you do this in like A Room of One's Own with the little Miss Dear chair inside is such a strong image, so poetic. And for me, there is such a strong message as well behind it. So, in very few times, I see designs that have that sort of narrative as well. Because usually, what is happening right now is that we see designs where the story is way more elaborated than the object, but you have like a perfect balance between your narrative and your
And the object.
pieces. you know it's not, they're at the same level. I think is it, not one of them, it's you know, above the other. So how do you, I don't know if this is something that you, it comes naturally or it's something that you think about, but how do you balance that well, these two parts of that sort of intellectual and that physical aspect of your pieces?
I think it's all, in a way, I think it's one process, because sometimes I feel whenever you do a new product or project, whether it is your own project, a limited edition, or a project for a company, it's like having a lot of puzzles without seeing the final picture. So when I think about new product, it's thinking about everything at the same moment. So
Mm-hmm.
it's thinking almost in the same moment about the name, about the technology, about the forms, and it's the matter of seconds. And when everything, you know, comes in one piece, then you know, you feel it in your heart. It's like falling in love. You know, you have a project. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really connected. It's hard for me to say that one comes before the other. Sometimes it can happen. It can be just a name which I really like and which evokes in me, let's say, a passion to do an object, or there is an object and there is a name that really fits. And it can be really moments. For example, now we will be launching this really beautiful collection for Natuzzi. I'm really happy. This was the very big work for our studio in the last few months. And I remember I had my first meeting last June. And when I landed, even before I went into the meeting, I knew, I said, okay, this Adriatic Sea again, it's something between them and me.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard this word deep. And I said, this should be the name of the collection. And, you know, it's the name of the collection. So sometimes you get these hints, which are so strong, and then you build around that. It's hard to explain in more detail. It's just one process, very, very connected.
And what about materials? At what point of the process, of the creative process, do you decide about them?
It depends. Let's say, for example, working with a company like Ghidini. Ghidini, it's one of the biggest producers of brass in Italy. So when they decided to do a new brand, it was a must and the base to work with brass, because they wanted to change the perception of brass. They wanted to do a contemporary design brand dealing with brass. So the material was the first thing, and you started from the material, and you start to think what this material means, how I can change again the meaning of this material. So it was from the beginning. On the other hand, for a company like Moi, let's say, which doesn't have their own technology, it's open. So it's not really, the first thing, it's not the material. Uh, but of course, as soon as you have any idea, material is there, because I think it's, again, like one of these puzzles. You cannot just draw something without thinking in advance which material it should be. So it depends on the brief, but material and the technology are one of, let's say, key elements on which you have to decide very early on, or even start from.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I wanted to ask you about your creative process. Where do you usually, what are your influences and where do ideas come from?
I think my this inspiration process is on like 24 hours per day, and I think you, as a creative person, you work, at least I do, like some sort of a visual library. So I'm all the time kind of checking wherever I am on the details, on the things. So I like to observe. I like to observe people. I like to observe things. I especially like places, or let's say I like to go walking into some very strange environments, so not really beautiful, not like galleries or exhibitions, but let's say some forgotten parts of the cities, or forgotten parts near the sea. And you know, you find so many details that you kind of store in your mind, and you have this visual library. And I have these hints that I like, and then when I'm faced with a project, I usually, let's say, try to dig inside of this personal library. But then again, to really work, I don't sketch, not much. I
Mm-hmm.
think. So I like to go walking. I need to move in order to think. And
Mhm.
when I have this really strong idea, this is where I sit at the computer and start working. So it really happens in my mind.
Okay. And you've collaborated a lot with the luxury industry and Dior and so many other
Mhm.
design brands that are not targeted to everyone. I wanted to ask you about how would you define luxury nowadays? Because it seems to be a term that is evolving, you know? It's sort of changing what used to be luxurious, what we thought of as luxury. What's your point of view on that?
I mean, for me, luxury, since ever, my perception of luxury maybe was always a little bit different than it is a usual perception. Because, first of all, I think the biggest luxury is to have time, to
Mm-hmm.
have freedom, to be healthy. I think these are the three really luxurious states in which you can be or live.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then again, when it comes to objects, I also think that true luxury lies in materials, in this timeless elegance, in the story, in the passion with which things are made.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the true luxury is actually the true understanding of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope this perception will become more clear now after, this big pandemic, which affected us all. I think true luxury is actually kind of a real respect toward things, toward environment. This is luxury for me.
Interesting. And as you mentioned, with this big crisis and this pandemia, what do you think the role of designers should be in this situation? Because you have this methodology to question things, to adapt to the circumstances, you know? So I think you are going to have, like designers in general, a key role in a world that we're going to have to rethink and rebuild to adapt to this new reality. How do you see this?
Uh, First of all, I think that even before this pandemic, the question of climate change and the question of sustainability was, and of course still is, the key issue to which we should all, in the recent years, looking back and also looking ahead, I think this is the key theme. I think this is the meta trend. I think these are the questions that are now really important. And I'm just hoping, because I was observing how quickly we as a society reacted to this virus, because we felt that we as a society are really immediately threatened.
Mhm.
And we were able to change our ways of living radically
Yes.
because of a virus. What I hope is that we are also able to change ways of living so radically or so quickly, also when it comes to the climate change, because I think we should really act. I think it's not the time to talk, to think. Of course, I mean, you should always do that, but to really get hands-on things.
Mhm.
I hope I can contribute as a designer. This question of sustainability became a key question also when I was working now with Natuzzi, for example, because I think Natuzzi is a really big company, and because it is so big, it has a power to change something.
Mhm.
But it starts with the changing of how things are packed, how things are shipped. So I think this is the key issue, and personally I will try to contribute with this. For me, this is the key question,
Okay.
and
Can
it has of course a lot of answers. It's not so easy to say, okay, let's just use recycled materials, do not use the virgin plastic. It's not so simple. So it's a really complex question, but I think it's the most important question.
Mhm. Are you looking into that from the material point of view? You know, there is this big
Yes.
of research and
Yes, for sure. In all the latest projects, we are looking into that. Of course, you need to find a balance, because the answer is not so simple.
Mhm.
Also, a lot of these new materials, they are really expensive, hard to work with, hard to get. So you need to find this balance between doing the objects which have this timeless value for which you hope can be inherited,
Mm-hmm.
also not in the sense of the materials, in the sense of the appearance. So to do objects with long lasting value on the other hand, on the other hand, to try to introduce these new objects done from, let's say, recycled plastic, but also show it in another way, because I think in the recent years this sustainable materials again had uh, sort of a meaning or a certain aesthetic, but I think we should offer more meanings, more stories, more aesthetics, so to really invite them in our life without knowing that they're sustainable. So I think it's a big field in which we can try to work, try to bring these new materials in a different way. And then, of course, I think we should all stop with the production of the virgin plastic.
Mm.
Uh, I think we should adapt our way. I mean, this is just one of the things. So, but you cannot, address everything, but wherever you can. And I think as a designer, when working with a company, my role is to try to get the best result in this sense as well.
Mhm. So, what would you like to see changing in the design industry? I mean, we're going through a crisis, blah, blah, blah. We had this ecological crisis, which seems totally secondary now with the coronavirus. But at one point, we're going to go back to this new reality. What do you think that is the most, what would you like to change actually? Not what is the most important thing to tackle, but what would you like to see happening in a different way in the design industry?
It's hard to say because, also for me, this future looks very much uncertain because we don't know how things will build up. And I think we are all now, let's say, living day by day,
Mm-hmm.
trying to see the visions. But then again, I really don't know. I don't have this answer. It's too hard to evaluate. I mean, for sure, but this maybe it's what we already addressed in this question before, a little bit of less traveling, different ways of presentation. uh, this is again just trying to be more sustainable, more ecological. Then again, I will always value this really beautiful moment of human meeting another human. And let's say Milano Design Week was one of these events, and you cannot achieve that through social media, through internet. It was this beauty, this magic of meeting up, of not knowing what will happen. So I sincerely hope we can, of course, be together again, see each other again. I think it's in the human nature. And I think this virus is just one story. I really believe this planet, this crisis of planet, it's the bigger story, which virus is just a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So
It is. It is. I mean, the virus
yeah,
is part of that bigger problem, because I mean, viruses were spread among different species. The less species we have,
yes,
I mean, virus will end up coming to us as it's happened, but
for
it's a
sure.
result of these ecological and climate crisis in a way. So, and we're pretty much done with the interview. It's all wrapped up, but I have one question that I was thinking about looking at your work for the first time because I work in marketing for a while, and when marketing, how would I phrase this? When you market a product target to women, when it's a design that sort of speaks to women more directly, it's only bought by women. When you do a campaign or a product that it's target to men, the both gender buy that, which is
Mhm.
back to this thing of the,
Interesting.
yeah, masculine is considered universal, while feminine is just for women. I was wondering if that has ever affected your work commercially.
Um, I don't. I don't think so,
Mhm.
because uh, in all these companies, of course, it was never marketed as something for women.
I know, but
Yeah.
I
Uh,
wonder how many men would have a pink lamp in their living room without feeling that that sort of threatens their masculinity, you
of
know?
course, no, of course you choose, but again, Lolita, you have it in gray, in white, in
Mm,
black, and it's
absolutely.
it's a different, it becomes a different piece. So it's hard to evaluate, but it's with all the objects. Of course, probably some objects were bought more by women than objects were bought by men. But I just remember, for example, Rosanna Orlandi saying that all the limited editions in her gallery were myself were mostly bought by men. It was just, you know, her observation. So I don't know. I don't have the answer for sure. They were never marketed, because nothing in the furniture industry is marketed
Yeah,
in
but
this
generally,
contemporary.
it's usually avoided to market in
Yes, it's
way.
just a story of an object, and I still believe we all have these different identities, and they can be really surprising. And you are just addressing a different identity, a personal identity, because I think you built your personal identity, regardless if you are a man or a woman, or, you know, transgender. There are now so many identities in real life. So I think this identities that you make up with your furniture are really open and
Mhm.
really should be open. And I think we as a designer, when we offer a certain poetry, it's just another space that you are offering to someone else to identify with.
Mhm. Wonderful. So I won't take any more of your time, Nika. It was wonderful to be able to talk to you. You have like a really, really interesting body of work. I follow you closely.
Thank you so
And,
much. It was nice to speak with you too. It's
mhm.
always nice now to speak with someone, to meet someone new, because, you know, we are living in this closed environment. So it was really nice.
So just once more, thank you for your time, and I really hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I did. And if you ever stop by Madrid, we would be thrilled to give you some tea,
Of course.
have a visit at the office, whatever. You know, we're here for whatever you
Yeah,
need.
I hope. I love Madrid. I really loved it. So I hope I come again soon.
Hmm. Okay, we'll be here waiting for you. So
Okay, and I just this thing I send you. I can send you now these new images. I heard that you have images of my work, mostly because of the interviews that Room Designer did before. So
we,
if you want
I believe we do have some of the images, but if you have that interview was
some new things, I
yeah,
would love to send some new things.
no, but this
Okay,
interview was quite a long time ago. I believe it wasn't. So if you have any recent pictures, they
okay,
would
I
be
will send.
more than welcome.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Same.
Bye.
To you.
Bye.
Bye.